Before we dive into today's episode, I've got to tell you about my personal journey with Munn Avenue Press. As an author myself, I've experienced firsthand their magic in turning books into bestsellers. They empower aspiring authors, giving voices like mine the platform they deserve. If you've got a story to tell and a dream, Munn Avenue Press is the ally you need to publish and market your book. Visit them at munnavenuepress.com. That's MUNN avenuepress.com to start your publishing journey, just like I did. Welcome, Color of Success podcast family. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie J. Wong. Check out my memoir, Cancel the Filter, Realities of a Psychologist, Podcaster, and Working Mother of Color, where I share my experiences in the realm of mental health, both professionally and personally. Color of Success podcast is streaming on all your favorite platforms and socials. Whether you're on the go or comfy on the sofa, you can tune in at your own comfort. As you know, we love growing discussions with our guests from our AAPI and ethnic minority communities. With so many friends and experts from different aspects of life, we love learning their stories and understanding what their success means to them. Let's get into it. Bonnie Wan is a partner and head of brand strategy at Goodby, Silverstein and Partners. She has been celebrated as an Ad Age Leading Woman for 2023 and 2022's Chief Strategy Officer of the Year. She is the author of the new book, The Life Brief, a playbook for no regrets living. I have a very special guest today. Bonnie, thank you so much for joining me. I have so much respect, and you are a brand and ad extraordinaire. So welcome to the show.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. It's a joy and a gift to be here.
Well, what I loved about your book is that you talk about how in your life, you looked great on paper. You had the house, the family, the marriage. And so what kind of led you to feeling like you were unfulfilled? What does that feel like?
Well, social media portrays often a different image than what's really going on. And for me at that time in the book, I had 3 kids under the age of 5.
I need a medal, by the way. I need a medal. I have 2, so they're older now as well, but oh boy.
Thank you. Well, I have 4 now, so that even predated.
A trophy.
Well, I just kept going. But at that time, they were so young, and having 2 kids yourself, how crazy it is in that moment, in that chapter of their life stage. And I was the primary breadwinner, the 24-hour restaurant, the main housekeeper, the chef, not quite culinary, but definitely the cook. And I was really frustrated. It was hard for my husband to jump in and do stuff. I think as a woman, I had prepared myself for this endeavor, this part of life. In fact, there were parts of me that had dreamt about it. Mm-hmm. But for him, it was really new. The transition was hard. And the more exhausted I became, the more critical I was. Mm-hmm. And so he really couldn't do anything right. It was training wheels for him. And I became increasingly brittle and stressed and critical. And so we started really coming at each other. We were arguing, negotiating, debating, comparing, competing. And it was breaking down, after, consecutive nights without sleep and doing long work trips and travel away from the kids. It just deteriorated. It started to cycle downwards. And as a strategist, I know what it's like for my clients to be in the trenches of their business, for them to be facing high stakes, high pressure every day. And it's really hard to see the forest from the trees. Mm-hmm. And so I found myself in the darkest hour in that spot about my life. And my strategist reflex kicked in. And I decided to zoom out in a way and collect the data. Turn my angst into curiosity and just give myself total permission to be nakedly honest about what I wanted. And as a strategist, I create data, I collect data by writing. I observe, I ask questions, I interview, I research. And so I kind of researched myself in a way. And I started writing, free writing, what I call now brain dumping, which is getting everything that's inside of me out onto the page without editing, without judgment, without withholding. And what came out on the page that night, very late at night, was a different story than the story I had in my head. Because the story in my head was that my marriage was broken, my husband was the problem. And instead, what came out was that what was broken was my relationship with time, that I was really spread thin and had nothing left to give my marriage. I was saying yes to all kinds of things that didn't really matter, that probably should have been no's. And once I could see that on paper, in writing, in front of me, that my real longing was not to break up and have less time with my husband, but I wanted more meaningful time with him and to be co-creators and partners in this thing called life. And as soon as I had that epiphany or aha, I was able to redirect my attention to how do I shift and reimagine my relationship with time. And so it automatically swung from, what do I do with this marriage? What does that path look like? Are we headed towards divorce? To, okay, how do I restructure my time? What is most important when it comes to time? Where would I spend it and invest it? So that was the first, I guess, ray of hope, that
So
something could be different.
that was really well said. And I think a lot of times when I'm working with professionals, with people who have partners and families, it really feels like you're on a sinking ship. Even though
Mhm.
it may look like you're steering it well, and behind the scenes, things are very, very difficult. And so when you say, amending your relationship with time, that's such an interesting concept because, as women of color, working women of color, we're often pulled in multiple directions. So, walk me through a little bit about how you were able to decide where to direct that energy. Like, obviously, prioritizing your husband and your children, was part of it. But I think a lot of people feel if they move towards that direction, well, then my career suffers. So, how do you harmonize that?
Well, it took some brave moves, but it started incredibly small, tiny slivers of time spent differently. So I sent my very first life brief, which had 5 declarative statements about time and what I really wanted to get out of time, with a sticky name, and that was Take Our Time. And that had 2 meanings. Take our time meant take back control of our time, be intentional with it. It also meant slow down, stop racing, stop that craziness. Now, there's always demands, right? So you can't get away from that. But I think I wasn't being thoughtful about, I was being more habitual than thoughtful about what I was saying yes to. But I sent that brief over to my husband and I didn't know how he would react. And to my delight and surprise, he texted back immediately, YES, all caps, triple exclamations. And that gave me this pump of joy. It was like, what? And it was our first moment of alignment. And so we got on the phone, we talked about how we both wanted this change. It wasn't just me. He was on board, but there were some fears holding us back.
Yeah.
And so we named those fears and we made a commitment to each other that we would hold each other strong through those fears. And then just as he went along with his time, I went along with mine, and I found the tiny slivers where I was doom scrolling the news or on Facebook at that time. That's no Instagram at that time, but on Facebook while I'm nursing a child or putting one to sleep, where my mind was going, I was redirecting that attention automatically towards our brief and thinking about the new alternatives and possibilities. So it just started small like that, the redirect of attention, because energy flows where our attention goes. So re-aiming that attention, even in the tiniest slivers of time, made huge strides. And so I started chasing my curiosity. Could we live somewhere else? Could we lower our cost of living and afford to have one of us step back from work? Like, we were just playing with ideas. And 4 months later, an interesting combination showed up in Portland, Oregon. And we were living in San Francisco at the time. And this combination felt like it could be right. And as my husband did a little more digging, we found out that we could have this house that was big enough for us at a lower cost, with the school 1 block away, the grocery store another block away, everything we needed in a 2 block radius.
Wow.
And that meant no more shoving kids into a car every day to get somewhere. We could just stroll and walk. It meant the money we would save would allow my husband to step back from work. But it was terrifying at the same time because it meant quitting my job to relocate, or so we thought. But we made this, we promised, right, that we would hold each other through our fears. And we just said yes. And I walked in to quit my job at the agency. And without batting an eye, my boss, the president of the agency, said, "Oh, why do you have to quit? Why don't you do your job from Portland, Oregon? And if it stops working, we'll both know and you can quit then." So I didn't even imagine that that alternative path was possible. I was just thinking, as many of us do when we're faced with a crossroads, that there are only two choices ever: stay or leave, yes or no, this or that. And all of a sudden, here I was presented with a completely different alternative, which is keep my job, stay financially stable as we made this move as a family. And that allowed my husband to step back from his career. So he was able to become the lead parent for our kids. I negotiated a 4-day week and we could live on that single salary. And that became a beautiful chapter until 6 years later, I became partner, I was promoted, and the agency asked us to move back.
So you are back in the Bay Area.
I'm back.
All right. Well, welcome back. You mentioned the life brief. This is a huge tool that you are putting out there in the world. So could you tell us a little bit more about what is a life brief? How do you even start to write one?
Yeah. So as a strategist in advertising, my job is to help companies get crystal clear about who they are and what they want and how they're distinct and unique from everybody else in their category or beyond. And then with that clarity, help them innovate, act, create from that place of distinction. And all of that is summed up in what's called a creative brief, which is a single-minded, single-page declaration of where this company is going. And so the life brief is a creative brief for your life. It's distilling what you want and what matters most into a single-minded idea. 5 statements that you would put an exclamation at the end of because you feel it so deep in your bones that this is what you want, summarized in a short, sticky phrase that kind of tattoos in your mind and heart so that you never forget it. And you can call it up anytime you feel slightly confused or you get asked a question or given an invitation, then you know where to direct it. So taking our time was that very first brief. And it reminded me every time I got an invitation how I wanted to spend my time. I had to pause and think, well, does this serve my new brief around time or doesn't it? Does it take me away from what matters most? Or does it allow me to dig in and lean in? And so that became kind of a North Star or filter.
I need, and everyone needs a Bonnie Wan in their life. Like it's like resonating with me. Like I need your help. So I believe in serendipity, and when I read that, oh my goodness, you were part of this team of the Got Milk campaign. So I used to collect them.
What?
And I have this book. I kid you not. I have this book, and that was one of the things I did as a kid. I would flip through magazines and, collect these wonderful pictures. And I mean, just more out of curiosity's sake, and childhood nostalgia. I mean, how did this campaign even come about and the intention behind it?
Oh, it's such a good story. And I can't claim any credit for the origin of it. But Jeff Goodby and Rich Silverstein are the founders of my agency. And they are also the originators behind that campaign. And it's very interesting because up until that iconic tagline, Got Milk, milk had been marketed as something that's very good for your health. It does a body good, And we did some research, the strategists on the job at that time, and they asked people to not drink milk for a week, get rid of their milk for a week, and then invited them into a focus group. And my goodness, were these people frustrated, angry, bitter, because without milk, and at that time we didn't have all these milk alternatives. There was no soy milk, but people were like, I couldn't eat my cereal. I love my cereal. Or what do I have with my cupcake or my lava cake at the end of the night? I wasn't going to have orange juice or a Coke. People just, they didn't know what to do. And the insight that came from the strategy was people don't think about milk until they run out of it.
Mm.
And that became, the impetus for the tagline, Got Milk, meaning, do you have enough at home? And then some very, very funny advertising that played into the fact that you don't want to run out when your mouth is full of peanut butter and jelly, or you're taking a big bite out of a Hostess cupcake, or you have a giant chocolate chip cookie. You better make sure you have a full tank of milk.
Thank you for humoring me. That's amazing. I was just like, this is so random that we are meeting, and that was one of the things that I did. So thank you. You're a huge advocate in the AAPI community, as am I. And I'm wondering, and I'm always trying to brainstorm with people about how do we come together and facilitate healing, strength, and safety, particularly during these very difficult times. And I would say it's not new, obviously, but there's a lot of overt behaviors and hate being directed to the community. So what are your thoughts on that?
Wow, I've really experienced that as a child when I immigrated here in Taipei, Taiwan, but it was very different then. It was part of the social fabric, just casual racism. It seemed to be acceptable. And I feel like we'd outgrown that. We had really evolved from that place until 2020. And then I saw it come roaring back.
Yeah.
And that was hostile. It retrenched so many memories. And it was painful, downright painful to see the elderly, people who are deeply vulnerable, really be at the receiving end of that hate. And then, of course, the murders in Atlanta during that time. So I think it was very violent for me to relive my own trauma while witnessing more trauma by others. I don't know that I have any good solutions other than, you can't see others until you can really see yourself. Mm-hmm. And I had to look in the mirror in 2020 and see all the ways that I had assimilated out of pain and survival as a child, out of a longing for belonging as an adolescent, and then out of a way to achieve as an adult, to climb the ladder and to have personal success. It meant denying who I was, my heritage, and a lot of the legacy, I guess, of my family and upbringing. And so the only way I could combat it, because I felt really helpless in 2020 in terms of the wider pain, was to look at myself as a leader, and how do I lead and how do I support other Asian Americans, AAPI, BIPOC employees under me? How do I look at power and power structures and how power exists and shows up in the workplace? And then how do I use the expertise and the mastery that I've learned over 3 decades in advertising and communications and platforms to put out messaging that fought or created new awareness or new behaviors around the hateful language, the violence, etc. So we created a really amazing campaign in 2020 that was called Respond to Racism. And it was a Twitter bot that went after all the hateful language happening on Twitter at the time that was, spiking the sentiment. And so this Twitter bot would counter those messages every time they showed up and offer a hopeful story of an Asian American who was doing everything they could at the front lines of COVID. They were first responders. They were doctors. They were, really meeting these hateful, stereotyped, caricatured messages with real stories of heroes at the front line who are Asian Americans. And so that was something that our agency put together really quickly through innovation and technology, and we put it out in the world. And I think that was one way to play our part. But longer term, it's always examining how I'm showing up as a leader and in what ways am I using my own voice and my own platform to call out the inequities that exist.
How do you find the strength? Because I think when folks feel that they're invalidated or they may not have an ally in the workspace, what can people do to feel like they matter and that it's not going to sink their career to say something in terms of social equity?
Well, I pick my moments. I think it's not that I have the megaphone and the soapbox every moment. And I leverage my understanding of effective communications to get the message across. I've learned that if I speak in a way that shuts people down, then I'm not being effective in terms of creating change. So my art as a strategist is we do a lot of facilitation. And so I've learned how to hold containers that are both safe and brave for people to be in dialogue. And my weapon as a strategist are questions. So I find that questions can be far more powerful to elicit change and to be thought-provoking than actually demanding answers. So a well-placed question can unlock a lot. And then the art of facilitation is a little bit like coaching or therapy. It's about building bridges, right? Facilitators are offering invitations for people with dissenting views or on opposite sides of debates to come together. Mm-hmm. And they hold that safety for both people to be heard. And I think that's a skill set that sets me up to raise the uncomfortable truths when I observe them. And it comes with tone of voice. It comes with how, I find anger can be really easy to shut down or shut out. But pointing out a truth and then staying calm, being centered, and coming from a compassionate place, wanting change that is lasting and meaningful, people can feel that energy when you bring it. When you couch it in respect, compassion, desire for love, to find a space, the hardest conversations can be de-escalated.
That's very powerful. And, particularly when you're talking with maybe senior leadership, how can we create kind of a container for those that may have more organizational or institutional power than us that do come off sort of aggressive, or as throwing out isms, sexism, racism, etc. in those spaces? I'm asking tough questions.
Yeah, they are tough. One thing is I don't take it personally anymore. I used to take it deeply personally. And that took a lot of practice, is to see that someone's blind spot or someone's aggression, I was not really the source or the catalyst for it. It wasn't really about me. And once I could depersonalize it, I could come from a place of either neutrality or curiosity. And I knew also, I didn't do this all the time, but I've learned to walk away from situations that are belittling, that are where I am overlooked and underestimated. I'm also a real practiced extrovert. I have over time, little by little, practiced inserting myself into uncomfortable situations. And I think everything's a practice, honestly. So now I'm pretty dang bold in a room. I can take up as much oxygen as the next person. I have to really recover after it. I need a real downtime, but I can go head to head, eye to eye, toe to toe with the best of them. And I again, it comes from a lot of practice though. I'm a natural introvert. But in 8th grade, I made the decision that wasn't going to get me where I wanted to go. And I made the conscious decision to start practicing. And it started by telling really raunchy practical jokes. I just kind of did it one day on the playground. I was like, what? Everyone was around me. They were laughing. And I realized, oh, wait a second. I have agency in this. I can put myself out there in ways and get the kind of reactions and the responses that I want. Now, it cost me a lot along the way. I had to learn when that meant sacrificing parts of myself. And now I'm not willing to make those trade-offs. But the good thing is it really helped me inch out onto the ledge farther and farther. And now I use that to defend others and speak up for others and fight for others.
You mentioned needing to recover after that. How do you self-care? Because it can be very, very exhausting to put yourself sometimes as a human shield.
Warm water, always.
I love it.
So it could be hot tea, it could be a warm bath, it could be a shower, it could be a soak, anywhere there's warm water, I can recover. And I just need alone time. I realize I can be out, I can be in, I can lean all the way in, but I then need to hide out and recover. And my family knows this, you know.
I try. I go in the shower, I blast the music, and somehow they have to talk to me right then. But it's all in
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
So I recently published my book, Cancel the Filter, and I'm circling back because just what you were talking about, the whole point of the book is to um, really debunk what you see on social media. And I really get it's a real talk book of like how my pregnancy went down, well, both of them, and just how difficult it is to harmonize these aspects of your life. So I'm wondering if you could share either one or a few of your cancel the filter moments where maybe again on social media it looked great, but really there was maybe struggle behind it or chaos as many of us parents like just live in.
How about all the time?
Well, my line was I'm always 20 seconds from losing my shit. And so
Yeah.
like really.
Yeah, all the time, you know? Um, I was just at South by Southwest and I had to give a big talk. And I think on social media, it looks like, wow, it was amazing. You know, you see photos of me, that the photographer took before the talk. You see me on stage. You see me at the book signing, the event afterwards. But the entire time I was anxious and nervous,
Mm.
ever since I entered menopause. I wake up at 4 in the morning,
Oh,
guaranteed with anxiety. And there's never a clear reason for it. It just is my body going through something. And that means I don't get enough sleep. And when I'm in that kind of environment, it can be really overwhelming. And I didn't feel good about my talk because I didn't feel centered. I know when I deliver a really good, strong performance, but I felt it was mediocre. And so I felt tired, overwhelmed, and a little disappointed. But the pictures don't show any of that. And I ended up at the dinner signing books for 3 hours. I didn't even eat
oh my
anything.
goodies.
And I came home, got in my pajamas, and ate a bag of nachos. So it's happening every time. The story behind the story is never as glamorous or as perfect or as polished as the story looks.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that because you see, and this is great because when you go on LinkedIn, people will post their gala pictures, their talks, all their accolades. And I'm like, what did you have to do to get to that point? Or even for some people, it's white knuckling it during a talk because they have social anxiety or they have, like you said, other things going on in their lives and their bodies that really do impact the way that they show up. And so coming from a place of empathy, but also like being real with each other and not holding ourselves to this perfectionistic expectation is part of what I love about the story that you shared.
More real, more mess. I think it's really important for women. Um, I know it's hard being a woman just to begin with because as I've come up in the world, in the professional world, it's a law of scarcity, or it has been for a
Yes.
long time, right? And if you show your mess, if you show your vulnerability, if you show your maternal side in a hustle harder world, you're not going to get that spot. And for a
Mhm.
long time, it was that. But when I got to the top, I thought, wow, what a disservice to all the other women coming up that we put on these polished, perfect airs. And we know women fall out in the middle ranks of their career because they
Yep.
look up and they're like, I'm not like that. My life's a hot mess.
Hmm.
And I'm trying to navigate partnership and whether to have kids. And if I do choose to have kids, oh my gosh, how do I juggle the job and the parenting and hold the aspirations my parents have for me, the expectations that culture has of me? How do I do it all? No way am I going to go for that top job. And so I realized it's really important for me to be honest about the mess. And I have gotten there. at those peaks being completely imperfect. And that's okay. So go for it. Your time will come. And it is messy all the way through. As long as we continue the mirage, the facade, that it's easy, it's seamless, it's effortless, we're going to do everyone a disservice.
Absolutely. Well, so much wisdom that you shared today. And so where can folks get your book? Your hand's probably tired from the 3 hours, but where can they see you and connect with your work?
Well, you can go to thelifebrief.com. It has everything about the book and a way to sign up for a newsletter. But everywhere books are sold, Amazon, bookshop.org. If you like the independent booksellers, those are the places to find me. And Bonnie Wan Official on Instagram.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. It's been such a joy.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you for listening. We would love for you to subscribe to the podcast and join our community on all our socials at colorsuccesspodcast.com. Looking forward to you checking out my memoir, Cancel the Filter, Realities of a Psychologist, Podcaster, and Working Mother of Color on Amazon and wherever books are sold. I'd love to hear your Cancel the Filter moments.